Okay, before you do anything else, let's just get started with this assignment by setting up a folder structure that's going to work for you. And we're going to gather some assets that you're going to need to have. So um, first things first, go ahead on your desktop or in your documents or wherever you save your files, create a new folder that's called jQuery lesson. jQuery is a library that is built off of JavaScript, and it's something that basically makes JavaScript a lot more efficient in the way that you write it. And you have to, later I'll show you how you can go and download the JavaScript library files. But right now, go ahead and create an empty folder that's called jQuery lesson like I have on my desktop. And inside of that, what I'd like for you to do is go ahead and find wherever you store your files, find your Pen 6 folder and your Pen 4 folder. And I want you to make copies of those inside of this jQuery lesson folder. I wouldn't move the originals. I would copy them and paste them inside of here so that you have duplicates. And the reason for that is because we're going to be using parts of both of those assignments to build upon to create this this last assignment, so that you're not having to start everything from scratch. It's going to save you a lot of time and still help you see how you can start to build, you know, larger websites and more sophisticated web pages on the things that you've learned so far and how you can integrate them together. All right, and so what we're going to actually do is take Pen 6, and if you remember, Pen 6 was the responsive menu. And if you wanted to just double check and look at that, we can open a copy of that, and this is what we had before, right? And if I sort of move that over, we had it so that on hover, any of these things would open up, right? Uh, and so on. Okay. Now, these links don't actually work. Okay. But what we're going to be doing, I'm going to, excuse me, go ahead and close that. Excuse me, I apologize for being sick and having to record this, but I have to record this. So anyway, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking this Pen 6 and we're going to duplicate it and change the name to Pen 7. Now, if you've already duplicated this, and this is your duplicate right here, then you can go ahead and just change the name of this to Pen 7. That's fine. Just to be safe, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to right click and I'm going to say duplicate. On Windows, you would have to right click and copy and paste, and it will create this copy. And I'm going to create this thing called Pen 7, like this. Okay, and now I can go inside of here and I'm going to take a look at this and make sure. I'm just going to do a quick preview, and this is in fact going to be the page that I thought that it was. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and go into brackets. So let's do that. Let's go and open our brackets. Oops. And it's going to open up probably to some other thing that you were already working on. So make sure that you go up here and make a new folder. So we'll say open folder, and I'm going to make this Pen 7, this new thing that I just identified, as my new working file. So I'll click on open. All right, and so now I've got my starter files to work with, and I can look at my index page, and you'll notice that I think that I had forgotten to tell you to change the title, even though this says Pen 5. I think that I had forgotten to change the title in the starter files for you before, so yours very well might still also say Pen 5, even though it was Pen 6. So, but the point is, go ahead and change it now so that it says Pen 7, and then we're going to change this where it says jQuery techniques or something like that. Okay. All right, and so that's your HTML page, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a horizontal split, and down here I'm going to click in this bottom and I'll select my styles to open up styles. And so these are the two things that I have open right now, is I've got my index file in the top and my style sheet in the bottom. Okay, now the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to explain a little bit about JavaScript to you, so that you have an understanding of what it is. So in the beginning of the class, I explained to you that if HTML is considered the structure or the the content and structure of the page, sort of like the bones of a house, and CSS is the presentation layer, right? It's the presentation or the visual styling of the page. Then there is another layer that is important to websites, and that is the behavioral layer. And the behavioral layer is is where JavaScript comes in. And so the reason that JavaScript is important and the behavioral stuff is important is that it really helps user experience. It helps provide clues that maybe wouldn't otherwise be as available through just normal CSS and HTML. So for instance, in this example, um, if I have this page open and I start to scroll, right, and the top of my page kind of disappears, well, now I get this button that will take me to the top. I can click it, and if I click it, it smooth scrolls, right? All of those things are JavaScript. And the thing that's nice about being able to smooth scroll like this on a page, for instance, is that whenever you do that, um, what's happening is it's providing visual cues to you so through its behavior so that you can tell that it did not navigate away from the previous page, right? That we're still on the same page because it's scrolling down or up or however it's scrolling, right? So that's a behavioral cue that helps with the usability of the page. Something else would be an example of like this lightbox feature. If I click on this, it, instead of taking me to a whole new page and navigating away from that original page, it just allows me to open this picture and also scroll through or navigate through this gallery so that I don't have to go away from the page and I can still easily get back to my content, right? So there are a lot of things about JavaScript that are really wonderful, and this is another thing that I'm going to show you is how you can click on this. You might have been frustrated uh, every time you move your mouse over, even by accident in the previous responsive assignment, um, that this thing would just automatically open. And so if you moved your mouse off and on quickly, it would open and close and open and close, right? Well, maybe that's not what you want. Maybe you want someone to actually intentionally click on this and then it stays open. Because the other frustrating thing about the hover feature is that if I were to hover off of it on a regular desktop computer, then the menu would have gone away. Right? Maybe I want to be able to open it and move around and highlight something or whatever to go away from it and still have this stay open. So that's another behavioral thing that the JavaScript allows for. Okay? All right, so let's get started. And the way that I'm going to help you get started first is I'm going to click over to a new tab and just for a really quick search, type in your Google search bar jQuery. And you can go to jQuery.com or you can just type jQuery, but then ultimately you're going to go to jQuery.com. Okay, and now what jQuery is it's a library that is, it's a structure, a platform, or I shouldn't say platform, it's an architecture um, that is built on JavaScript. So it takes the core of JavaScript and it writes a lot of functions that then it allows users to use. And what it does is it creates a library of those functions and puts it in a file that you can then reference. And you reference that file and then you can use its functions. And it makes it a lot easier. It makes it, some people would say that it's not as efficient. It really just depends on your perspective, but it's a really popular uh, popular framework, and it allows you to kind of more intuitively and more efficiently write scripting that will allow JavaScript to access the document object model. Now, what is the document object model? The document object model, also referred to as the DOM, so if I say DOM, it's DOM, it stands for document object model, is the way that the browser will render out the HTML. What it does is it takes your document and it creates a model of objects that are in that document. So every element, for instance, is an object. So let's, for instance, if I say I want to inspect this page, actually, let's inspect this page. It's a little bit simpler. What's happening, okay, is that, and you see here it says DOM breakpoints. We're not going to get into all of that stuff, but you do see, if you see DOM, that stands for Document Object Model. And what's happening is that uh, the browser looks at every single one of these tags, all of these elements, and it breaks them down into objects. And they're objects that then are actionable, like they're targetable, like you can do something with them. So you could write a script that somehow targets them and also changes them, right? And what's nice is that, so like for instance with CSS, we can target something and we can style it to make it look a certain way, but we can't start to rewrite the HTML using CSS. That's not something that we can do. We can't swap things out and substitute things on the fly, right, with CSS. All we can do with CSS is write styles that will target some of these things, like it'll target a section or it'll target a paragraph or whatever, right? Um, but with, and it'll make it look a certain way. But with the document object model in JavaScript, what you can do is you could target something and then have it change on the fly. You can modify it. You can add classes or remove classes so that the styling will ultimately change. And that's what we're, for instance, going to do up here. Whenever, if you take a look, let's take a look up here when we get to the header, right? So if we look at this header right here, and it says global nav, all right, and right now it just says class. It doesn't have a class on it. If I click this, you see what happened right here is that it says class equals nav open. If I click it again, it removes that class. All right, and so what's happening is that jQuery is targeting this nav global ID, and it's saying, hey, when this menu button right here, this anchor tag that's got the ID of menu, when that is pressed, then target this nav global ID and add the class of nav open, and that class makes it look like it's open. And then whenever you toggle it again, remove the class, right? And so it's really simple actually, and that's the way that that works. And so it's able to target things that are in the DOM. And the other thing that I want to point out to you that is important in understanding document object model is that it's about what is rendered by the browser. Okay, so what is right here, okay, is what is being rendered by the browser. It is the DOM. Whenever the browser encounters a page, it takes the document and then it takes an inventory of the document and it builds the inventory and it renders everything out. And that's how it can change it. That is different sometimes, not always, but sometimes that is actually different than if you were to go up here to View, Developer, and then View Source. If you view the source, this is actually what's in the file. It's not what's being rendered, it's what's actually being read directly out of the file. And that's an important distinction. Okay, because this is not necessarily the rendered document object model, this is actually just the strict HTML. And so that's why sometimes when you have an error in your code, like you have a syntax error, maybe you didn't end an anchor tag or something, like let's say that, pretend like that wasn't there. Well, what would happen is that the DOM, the browser, whenever it renders the DOM, it would try to fix that. It would try the best way it knows how to fix that so it can still display the page. And so that's why sometimes whenever you have syntax errors, you can't always find them just through going and looking here. You can kind of see that something's not right. And so what I'll do sometimes is I'll compare what is in the rendered version to what is actually in the HTML. And if they're different, then that sometimes will tell me that I probably have a syntax error somewhere in my HTML. All right, and so that's something that's not specific to JavaScript and jQuery, but since we're talking about the DOM, you should understand that what is in the view source is not always necessarily identical to what is being rendered out here whenever you use the inspector, okay? Because the inspector is inspecting what is being rendered by the browser. Okay, so now that you have a better understanding of the DOM, I'm going to show you in the next video how you can install the jQuery library file to get started.